As we look forward to a rebound here in Tampa Bay, we want to make sure you have the resources you need to navigate through this tough time. And today we're going in depth with a reporter focused on the people doing whatever it takes to bring some good into this situation and the ones fighting to bounce back. My guest is ABC Action News reporter Michael Paluska. He's hit the ground running since this pandemic began, delving into what businesses need and the opportunities for people who are seeking work. We touch on all of this and more. I'm James Tully with ABC Action News, and this is the Rebound Tampa Bay podcast. Now, here's Michael.
You know, being out in the community and, going to stores on my own to buy groceries, it's a different world, and then when you go to cover stories, it's so different. It's split 50-50. Some people I interview are wearing full masks. A lot of people that I'm still interviewing for stories still come up and want to shake hands, and we're the people that are saying, hey, social distancing, I get it that, I'm meeting you for the first time and I'm a news reporter.
We have to practice what we preach.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, masks on for certain stories in certain areas. If we're outside, we do the social distancing and I'm not always wearing a mask. But it's really split. And I think that society is really going to stagger the approach regardless of what the government entities tell us in each of our local counties. I think people are going to make their own decision for their family because it's such an important issue. And if we just jump the gun on this and everybody goes out at once, I think that we could put ourselves in a position where it's a lot more dangerous, especially for those high risk groups.
Well, it kind of has to go that way. This is how it's all going to unfold. The governor's going to make a call. And then it's going to trickle down to every single county and municipality. Mayors are going to weigh in, but then county commissioners are going to overrule them in some cases. I mean, it's going to be a little bizarre, but like you said, it has to be done on a case-by-case basis because if you look at Florida, how different your situations are from the east side of the state to the west side of the state. I mean, your cases per capita vary greatly depending on what county you're looking at.
Right, and I think Miami, right? They're not lifting any restriction. I mean, they're keeping their restrictions in place because they were a hot zone.
Exactly. Yeah, even the governor said he excluded 3 counties around Miami. So yeah, that's kind of what you're looking at. Everybody else, okay. Here's what I say. Here's what I say we should do. Now you guys make the final call, looking down on the tinier municipalities. That's how it's going. It's very interesting, but as you said, it seems to be the way we're going to do it might be the best way to do it.
And, being a journalist and consuming so much of it, we're reading so many different periodicals, so many magazines. We're watching all of the major networks. We're watching all of our local news. So there's so many different opinions just based on how people are covering the story or what you pick up one day. So, I mean, it would be so difficult now to be a leader in a community and have to make those tough decisions about, are we going to keep putting people's livelihoods at risk? Are we going to keep them out of the restaurants? Are we going to keep the chefs and the bartenders and the hairdressers home, even though we're opening up these other sectors? And for how long? Like, how long can they really last without getting a paycheck? But then you think about people getting sick again, and it's the unknown that they're having to balance the medical information, the science, and then really what is the detriment for the cure, and then possibly keeping to impact people's lives. So it's just so complicated.
The flip side of that, Michael, is keeping people at home too long could pose other health risks too. That's been argued as well. People fall into depressions, suicide rates, all kinds of things. There really is. There's no easy answer here. There hasn't been the entire time.
No, I know. And you want someone to have like the answer for you, and you hear something really great. And then the next day you see cases jump somewhere and you're like, wow, what did we do wrong there if we did anything wrong? And it's so hard to track.
It's almost impossible to track. You could almost boil it down to this. It's the economy versus your health at this point. So people are going to jump on both sides of that.
The crazy thing, so talking about rebound stories, like 3 weeks ago, I did a whole contact tracing report. It wasn't a rebound thing. We launched this new franchise about helping businesses and reporting on medical advancements that are getting people back to a new life and getting them back to normal. But I did a contact tracing story out of Singapore that they had the whole app with Bluetooth that they've been using for almost 4 weeks now. And our tech companies, we have Google, we have Facebook, we have all the major tech companies, Apple, that haven't developed a contact tracing app to launch out nationally. The state health departments haven't done one. We've talked about it, and they've been doing the disease detectives going out in the community and then tracking who you may have interacted with that got a positive COVID-19. But we really haven't gotten the technology there to track it so that we can all sort of download this app, know that our privacy is fine, but know that it's for the greater good of health. And that's been really surprising to me, just reading all of this stuff about how far behind we are in contact tracing and testing.
And we need to catch up, too, because, you had Dr. Fauci, the top infectious disease doctor in the country, weigh in on how that is going to be so crucial, is contact tracing as you start to reopen this, because that determines who you need to isolate after we get more people out and about, working, right, going into, all kinds of retail shops and things like that. It's crucial. So we better pick up I think you're right. We need to pick it up, and quickly.
Yeah. And I got the text from Hillsborough County and from the city of Tampa saying, hey, you don't have to have those symptoms or the CDC guidelines. If you want to get a test, you can get a test now. So you can call the number, you can make an appointment. You don't have to have, a connection with someone that had a positive case. You don't have to have a travel history. So anybody in Hillsborough, they're trying to get everybody tested, which is phenomenal.
Oh, it's absolutely phenomenal. You've done a lot of work here on human interest stories, focusing, getting people jobs, getting them back into work some way, somehow. Let's delve into that a little bit. What are some of the things that you're most proud of you've been able to uncover here?
Well, I went out and I interviewed a couple of welders a couple of days ago, and they are looking at a shortage just before COVID-19 of 500,000, so about 500,000 welders, like skilled welders, will be needed over the next 10 years. There's always a shortage of welders, but they've been working through this whole thing, putting food on the table, and there's trade schools where you can do the welding and you can learn the apprenticeships through some of the unions. But they were so passionate about what they're doing, and they said, hey, the one guy I interviewed, the story's going to air in a couple of days, maybe next week. He said he was going to school to be an elementary school teacher, and then he decided he wanted to work with his hands and do a trade, and he just didn't want to think about going into debt from college. So I think we have to rethink as a society, like where we're going to make our money, where we're going to go into debt. Are we going to, spend $3 or $4 grand to go learn a trade, or are we going to spend 30 grand a year to get an MBA or whatever? So I think there's a lot of options, but it's really inspiring. At least the welder I interviewed, his story, because he said he feels so fulfilled that he makes everything every day with his hands. He's not in any debt, and he's contributing. I think he's doing like fuel pipelines and stuff. So it's just different. But those are the inspiring stories. So people we don't normally talk to that are just out there every day, just making a living for their families, and they're learning a skill, and they're bettering their lives, and they're actually making their own lives richer because they're doing something good. So that's kind of impressive.
I'm so surprised you said welders. You said there's always a need for welders. That is not, if you would have put me up against the wall and said, name me a job we're always going to need, or it's always in need, I would not have said that. This is all focused on a rebound. So we want to get to as much positivity as possible. It's kind of amazing how I look at restaurants in particular, how a lot of them have had to completely change their business model to try and survive during this, whether or not they got the help from the federal government. I mean, restaurants went as far as delivering happy hour to people just to try and stay afloat. Is it enough? Well, time will tell on that one. Anything else pique your interest as far as businesses you've seen? Also we can talk about the businesses that have changed their manufacturing plans to start manufacturing PPEs. That's been a very impressive thing. Anything that's kind of struck a chord with you where you've seen companies throw everything out the window and say, okay, we can do this, we can help, and we can still make some money for ourselves?
Yeah, so I interviewed the owner of Blind Tiger Cafe, and he's in Ybor City, has multiple locations, but the main one, Blind Tiger Coffee. He owns Cass Street Deli too. So he rearranged, since they were closed down, the coffee shop. He completely upgraded it. He kept his employees working because they helped with the remodel. He said, they're in the heart of Ybor City, so they don't get the cruise traffic. They don't get the tourist foot traffic coming in. They don't get regular business people who are taking a break during, office hours to come in. But he teamed up with a national chef, and he stayed open in his coffee shop, rearranged it, made sure all the tables when they do reopen are 6 feet apart, so he can already do social distancing. So he's preparing for that, which was smart. And then he teamed up with a chef for his deli, and they're doing a federal program where they're feeding restaurant workers every day for the next 3 weeks. and it's through Maker's Mark initiative and a Kentucky chef that did it. So he's not only running his coffee shop, but he's feeding people in the community in need because he got a grant. So then he's keeping his chef at Cass Street Deli employed. So he's wearing all these hats, and he's like, I didn't know what to do, so I just started doing whatever I could do. So it wasn't even an option for him to fail. One guy told me that he was going to, use whatever he had in his mortgage, and he'd get a reverse mortgage, and he would pay his employees out of whatever value he had in his home to keep them employed to fight out the storm. So there's a lot of people that are the business owners, that are small business owners, that have a little bit of capital that they were saving for their retirement that they're willing to pull from and then keep their employees afloat. And that to me has been incredible. Because, it's not, your 401k didn't take a huge hit in the past 2 months.
I know exactly. Well, I mean, do you think do you think, as much as that is probably out of the goodness of people's hearts, do you think that's also because they know that this is a great time to get some good publicity, and word of mouth oftentimes is your best advertiser in any time, especially a time of crisis? Do you think that's part of it too?
Yeah, I think it's I was thinking that the other day because we don't really do stories on like just small businesses that are running a business because that's just what they did.
Exactly.
We'd always have to find a news peg. Like we wouldn't just go out and interview a hamburger shop because they had 10 people employed. But the whole script has flipped where now we're interviewing small businesses because they're the story. More than 30 million Americans filing for unemployment in the last 6 weeks. They're the story. And then you interview them during this time and you realize, okay, well, they are getting publicity. And that always feels like, we're not commercial, we're news. We want to tell the story, not in a way that we're like being a commercial entity for them and promoting just a bunch of random businesses like sales. We're not sales, I think is what I'm trying to say.
We're not, but when it's something a viewer that can benefit a viewer and something they can use, then it absolutely has a place in a newscast.
And when I interview someone that comes across as so genuine, where that they're not trying to exploit the fact that they're, doing these good things, it's definitely from the heart. So that's what's been amazing to see. I haven't seen anyone think, oh, I got to get publicity out of this. They're so excited to tell their story because they just want to help.
Yeah, I was really playing devil's advocate because that's exactly what I've seen. As a matter of fact, when all
I don't trust anybody. So, I'm a news reporter. So, I always go in thinking that this guy's just trying to, get free publicity. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. You have experience in that, more so than me. I was going to say, when this all started, I was trying to reach out to everybody that I knew that either owned a business or ran a nonprofit or whatever else. And my big pitch was, well, I'm trying to turn content for our morning show, and I'm looking at whatever is going to be useful for people watching, something that can help them. Or if there's nonprofits that are in need, is there something they need that people can provide them? So my big pitch was, what do you guys need right now? Particularly with the nonprofits. And I swear, 80% of the time, of all the ones I called, it wasn't about what we need, it's about what we're doing for people during this time. So, Dee and I say it all the time, but really, in the worst of times, it brings out the best of people more often than not. You just see it time and time again.
Yeah, and like I interviewed a military veteran who runs a PR firm, and he changed this whole thing where he's now doing news style stories promoting businesses that have changed and then giving people creative ideas to change. And he had the military attitude, which you just, you're getting shot at, you don't just hide, you got to fight back. So, I mean, he definitely had a different perspective. But then I interviewed a martial arts instructor yesterday, and she's like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm teaching these kids about integrity and about, developing their confidence. And we can't just let the virus ruin us. So she said, yeah, we've taken a big hit, but we just kept working. And they're going to survive. They've been in business 8 years. They'll be in business another 8, 20, 30 years. It's that attitude, too, So that's been coming across a lot.
It is. I know you don't have a crystal ball, Mike, but before I let you go, how do you see this unfolding? What do you feel good about, and what do you not feel so great about?
Well, the numbers scare me about the number of unemployed. And what scares me is the fact that all of those folks are going to have to try to come back at a lower capacity, like, 25% in restaurants or 50%, it's going to take a long time. So it scares me about if there's a second wave of the virus, if we have to sort of reclose things and sort of fall back. But I'm also optimistic in that once people start going back to work, if the virus subsides and people aren't getting sick, and we're not losing lives, I feel like it'll turn on like a faucet. And once it turns back on, the economy's going to restart and we're just going to keep going. So that's the optimist in me. So there's those two you're balancing, like the unknown of this virus that just came out of nowhere in March and just ruined so many lives. And then there's the optimist saying, all right, well, once the water is back on, it's going to flow and you're going to be back to normal. So I'm hoping that's what happens.
That's perfect. Paul made an interesting point to me. So I had Paul Agrone on the pod last week, and he made an interesting point to me about how, sooner or later, people are just going to have to go out into the unknown and face the kind of things that they've been quarantined and forced to avoid for so long. Do you see a similar situation too, where people, so long we've been told you have to distance, you can't go here, you can't do this, you can't do that. You just have to kind of step up and go out into the unknown and continue your life. We're going to get to that point.
Yeah. And I was talking to my wife about it. And I told her I had to go to work the other day because, I'll probably shoot all day, like 7 or 8 hours, like shoot 3 stories and then have a writing day or have 2 writing days in a row. So there was a weekend where I'd shot everything on like a Friday and then I had Saturday, Sunday off and then Monday a writing day. I had to go to work on like the 4th day. I hadn't driven to work because I'd been working from home and I was like nervous to go outside. You know what I mean?
I know.
Like you're like, it gives you that feeling where it's almost like you look out into the beauty of Florida and there's this fog and it's the fog of the virus because you don't know where it is. So when you get enveloped in it, it's just ever present everywhere, which is nuts.
You're going to be bouncing your grandkid on your knee someday. What do you tell them about this? What do you tell them about this time in our lives?
I got a 4-month-old daughter on my porch I'm looking at right now. And she'll be 5 months old next week.
Okay.
And yeah, and I look at her and I'm just like, Parker, you're living in this, you don't know, what happened. If you look back and ask them, be like, yeah, mom and dad, we just hung out at home for three months or a year and the whole world closed. It's weird to think that in 3 years, she won't know the world we knew as kids growing up. That's I think we just, she'll see people at a store with masks on and she'll think it's normal. Us, we're still getting used to it. So the world we leave for Parker, for my daughter, and for grandkids is one where we just have to be hygienic, wash our hands, stay safe, so keep social distancing, get, investing into more vaccines, medical technologies, and then just try to be able to use our brains as a society to fight.
Yeah, look, there's good that can come out of this. It's not a bad thing that we all get a nice reminder of how important it is to wash your hands, and not touch your face. And maybe you don't have to shake hands with everybody that you meet, and just be kind of cautious of this stuff.
Right. It just explode from afar. Just boom.
I was going to say, I had a similar feeling that you did when this all first started. I think it was right before the lockdown. And I was sitting outside of a Target, and it just so happened I had to take a work call on my phone. So I stayed in my car, and I was talking on the phone. And I just was watching people pull up, park, put on masks in their car, and then walk in. And, it's just... I just had there's a very weird moment, where it kind of all hit me. And I was like, this is it. This is where we are now. And I'm going to be seeing a lot more of this. Keep in mind, this is over a month ago. Right. So it's a weird realization. I'm sure you've had that at least a couple of times.
For sure. Yeah. When they first did the order to recommend Hillsborough wearing masks, we went to the grocery store and there's 50-50 people wearing masks and 50 people not. And then, you go back a week later and almost everyone in there is wearing them. So it's kind of the new norm.
Well, let's end it with this. How are you guys holding up? You and your family and you going to work and everything. To tell the listeners how you're doing.
Yeah, well, my wife's a nurse. So, she's at a hospital saving lives. And, she walks in the hospital, wears a mask all day, and she doesn't take it off until, she's outside on a break trying to get some fresh air. But, her being a nurse and me being a news reporter, we're out in the field and we're talking to people. So, we're both trying to mitigate the risk of us getting it and bringing it home to our daughter. And we're also trying to mitigate the risk of whether or not we're asymptomatic and we could be walking through society carrying it and not knowing. So, I've gotten to the point where I'll take my temperature every morning just at home to know that, I don't have a fever, just because my job is to tell stories and my wife's job is to save lives. And both of us are in the middle of the possibility of being a higher risk to get it. So we're trying to mitigate that as much as possible, but definitely not bring it home to our daughter, Thankfully, so far, so
Well,
good.
we need both you guys out there doing what you do. Your wife, her outlook on everything, the things that she's seeing every day, positive,
Yeah.
staying positive.
Yeah. Yeah. She's, so far, she's had some days where they're not doing elective surgeries. So, they called and said, hey, you can either work a half day or, take a PTO, don't come in because, we don't have enough people here. So it's been good. She hasn't been overrun.
And that was one of our biggest concerns when this all started too.
Yeah, and the cool thing, and I'll mention this just because we're talking about rebounding and doing things differently. When the floor she works on, whenever she gets an older patient and they got to go back to a nursing home, they are on a rule out floor where they have to get tested for COVID and be negative twice before they'll take them to the nursing home. And our numbers have been a lot lower. So, my wife's been doing that for, a month and a half where they make sure that they're not sending someone that could be sick back into those high risk communities. So, we've seen our healthcare folks doing the right things to try to protect the population that are high risk. So I didn't know that they were doing that, but there's a whole checklist, and we're hearing more about it now after Governor Ron DeSantis mentioned that he put those protocols in place. So it's been nice to see that we were one step ahead and we're not ending up like Boston and some of those other northeastern states that have a lot of people dying in nursing homes.
That is something to feel good about here in the state of Florida, no doubt. Michael, what can we look forward to hearing and seeing from you in the coming weeks and days here?
More stories about human beings doing good stuff.
All right, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your time. I think we had a pretty good combo here. This works. Please subscribe to the Rebound Tampa Bay podcast on Apple and Stitcher, and know that at ABC Action News, once we start to rebound here, there are steps you can take. And know that at ABC Action News, once we start the rebound here in Tampa Bay, there are steps you can take to find help for your family. Visit abcactionnews.com/rebound. I'm James Tully. Thanks for listening.